I was 68 years old when my son-in-law set a folder on my kitchen table, smoothed it flat with both hands, and said, "You really don't need an attorney for any of this. It's all very straightforward." He said it the way people say things they've practiced. Smooth. Almost gentle. The kind of careful that only comes when someone has something to protect. What he didn't know was that I had already met with an attorney 2 days earlier, on a Thursday afternoon, and she had already explained to me, word by word, what every page in that folder was designed to do. I smiled at him and offered tea. He said, sure, he'd love some. I noticed he didn't say thank you. My late husband Gene used to say you could learn more about a person from how they accept a kindness than from how they give one. I'd thought of that often over the past year. I thought of it again right then, watching my son-in-law pull out a chair without being invited to sit and arrange himself at my table like a man who had already decided the room was his. Gene passed 6 years ago. We'd been married 41 years. We built this house together, not literally, though Gene liked to say he had, because he'd helped frame the back porch addition in 1994 and never let anyone forget it. We bought the lot in 1983, raised 2 children inside these walls, paid off the mortgage in full by our 35th anniversary, and once buried a gray tabby named Walter in the far corner of the yard. The house is mine, every square foot of it. My daughter Laurel knew that, or she used to. She married Barrett 12 years ago. I tried to like him from the beginning, and for a while I did. He was charming in the way some men are, effortlessly, and just a degree too much. He ran a landscaping business. He talked constantly about expanding, about commercial contracts, about a major account he was always on the verge of landing. The account never quite arrived. The business shrank a little each year, and the conversations about it grew louder to compensate. What changed between us happened slowly, the way water damage does. Not a sudden flood, just a slow seep, patient and quiet, until one morning you press your hand to the wall and realize the whole thing has gone soft underneath. It started with small things. Barrett offering opinions about my finances without being asked. Whether I was getting a good rate on my savings. Whether my homeowner's insurance was really the best option at my age. Laurel repeating those opinions later, casually, as though they were her own. Then comments about the house. It's a lot to maintain for one person, isn't it? Have you thought about somewhere more manageable? Somewhere with, support available if you need it. I was 65 at the time and walked 2 miles each morning before breakfast. Then the requests started. Not large ones, at first. A short-term loan when their water heater failed, and they'd stretched the credit cards thin. I helped without hesitation. That's what you do. A few months later, a contribution toward replacing the business Van Barrett used for his contracts. I helped with that too. Then something about a home equity line, temporary, just until a deal cleared. I helped again. Each time, Laurel assured me it would be paid back. Each time, the subject changed before it ever was. I told myself this was what parents did. They gave. They helped. But gradually, without my naming it, the dynamic had shifted. I had stopped being someone they came to with gratitude and become someone they came to with expectation. The difference is quiet at first, then it isn't. What made it harder to name was the way Barrett spoke to me. Not cruelly, he was never openly cruel. It was something softer than that and more persistent, the way he'd cut into a sentence before I finished it, gently, as if I'd been about to lose my place. The way he'd explain things back to me that I'd just explained to him, slower, more carefully. As though my version hadn't quite landed. Once, in front of Laurel, he patted my hand after I mentioned my investment account and said, "That's okay, we'll handle all that for you." I hadn't asked anyone to handle anything. Laurel said nothing. That was the part that hurt most. Not Barrett's certainty, my daughter's silence. The folder appeared on a Tuesday in early spring. Barrett had called that morning, not to ask whether he could stop by, just to say he was coming, around 2 o'clock, that there were some things worth going over. I said fine. I put the kettle on. Laurel arrived first, which surprised me. She hugged me at the door quickly, and I noticed her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Barrett came in behind her with a smile that was doing more work than a smile should have to. He set the folder on the table the way a salesman might. Squarely, deliberately, like it was already a done deal. and this meeting was a pleasant formality before the handshake. "We've been doing some research," he said, pulling out the chair across from me without being invited to sit. "There are documents that would simplify things considerably, legally speaking, just to establish order and make sure everything is protected in case anything ever happens." In case anything ever happens. I kept accounts for 38 years at a family-owned lumber company. I know how to read the numbers behind the language. In case anything ever happens is almost always a way of saying before you're paying close enough attention. Laurel set her hand on the folder like she was presenting it. "It's nothing complicated, Mom, just routine." I left the folder where it was and asked them about the drive over. After they left, I opened it alone at the kitchen table. What I found wasn't simplification. It wasn't protection. It was transfer of property rights, of account access, of all decision-making authority. The final page was a durable power of attorney, broad and immediate, naming Barrett as my agent, not Laurel. Barrett. I sat with that for a long time. Then I called my grandson. Liam is 23, in his second year of law school out of state. He has his grandfather's quality of being sharp without announcing it, steady rather than showy, the kind of person who watches a situation carefully before he says a word about it. He'd been sending me small, careful messages since Christmas. "How are you doing, really? Is everything all right at the house?" Things I'd brushed off as normal affection from a young man who'd grown up close to his grandmother. When I told him about the folder, there was a pause long enough that I asked if he was still there. "Grandma," he said quietly, "I need you to hear me. Don't sign anything, not one page. And tomorrow I want you to call an attorney." I asked him if he thought I was reading too much into it. "I think," he said, "that you already know the answer to that." He was right. I'd known the moment Barrett set that folder down and smoothed it with both hands. I'd known from the way Laurel wouldn't meet my eyes. I just needed someone I trusted completely to say it out loud so I could stop being polite to myself about it. The next morning, I went to the bank. I've kept accounts at the same branch for over 20 years. The branch manager, Mr. Whitfield, handled the paperwork when Jean died. He knows me. When I sat across from him and said I wanted to know whether anyone had made inquiries about my accounts without my authorization, he was quiet for a moment before he turned his monitor slightly toward me. 3 separate inquiries over 5 months. The most recent, 2 weeks earlier. Someone asking about balances, beneficiary designations, access procedures. Not fraudulent in any technical sense. Just careful, methodical information gathering. A map of my finances, drawn without my knowledge or consent. The dates corresponded exactly to when Barrett's comments about my living situation had sharpened. "I'd like to lock everything down," I told Mr. Whitfield. "New passwords, notification alerts for any activity, no third-party access without me present." He made every change himself right there at his desk. When he slid the summary across to me, he held my gaze for a moment. "I'm glad you came in," he said. I thanked him. On the drive home, I didn't feel frightened or betrayed. I felt something more useful than either of those. I felt certain. Ms. Dowell's office was in a low brick building near the post office, the kind of place you drive past 100 times without registering. Liam had found her through a contact in his program and called her himself to explain the situation before I even made the appointment. She agreed to see me the next afternoon. I brought the folder. I brought the bank documentation. I brought a small notebook where I'd written down, over 2 evenings, every incident I could recall. The loan requests, the comments about the house, Barrett's account inquiries, the particular way Laurel had stopped offering her own opinions in my presence anymore. Ms. Dowell read through the folder carefully and without visible reaction, the way someone reads who is noting things rather than reacting to them. She asked a few quiet questions. Finally, she set it down. "This document would give your son-in-law complete control over your property and your financial accounts," she said. "The structure makes reversal very difficult without his explicit cooperation, and the power of attorney names him, not your daughter." She paused. "Has anyone pressured you to sign this?" "Yes." "Has anyone suggested you wouldn't need legal advice before signing?" "Yes." "More than once?" "Yes." She nodded once calmly. Then here's what we're going to do. What she outlined was methodical and straightforward. She would file documents, creating a legal notation on my property. Any transfer would require my signature in the presence of counsel. She would help me finalize the account security I'd started at the bank. She would draft a formal notice to be sent to Barrett and Laurel, stating that any future discussion of my estate or finances would go through her office. And if I wanted, she said, she could be present the next time they came. I told her I'd like that very much. They arrived on a Saturday morning without calling first. I had expected them to give notice. Barrett never moved without choosing his moment, and an unannounced visit was a way of removing preparation time, arriving before I'd had a chance to think. What he couldn't have known was that I had asked Ms. Dowell to hold that weekend available, and that when I heard the knock at the door, she was already seated at my dining room table, her briefcase open, a cup of coffee at her elbow. Laurel hugged me at the door. Her hands were tense across my shoulders. Barrett stepped in, and his eyes went immediately past me to the table. His smile didn't disappear, exactly. It just stopped working. "Who is this?" he said. "My attorney," I said. "Come in." He sat. Laurel sat beside him. Ms. Dowell didn't introduce herself. She simply waited, with the particular patience of someone who has been in this room many times before and knows exactly how it unfolds. Barrett recovered quickly. He was good at that. He leaned forward, voice even, reasonable, practiced. "We're just here to tie up a few loose ends. That's all. Nothing complicated. You really don't need an attorney for any of this. It's all very straightforward." The same sentence, the same tone. I looked at him and said, "I know. That's what you told me before. That's exactly why I knew I needed one." Ms. Dowell placed a document on the table. Mine, not his. "Mr. Barrett," she said, "the documents you presented to your mother-in-law are not standard estate planning instruments. They're structured to transfer complete control of her property and her finances to you specifically, not to your wife, with language designed to make those transfers extremely difficult to undo. We've also documented unauthorized inquiries into her accounts over the past 5 months." Barrett's jaw tightened. "Those were informal. I was trying to get a picture of her financial situation so we could help her plan." "Without her knowledge," Ms. Dowell said. "She doesn't always." "I understand everything," I said. I kept my voice the same temperature it had been since they walked in. "I kept accounts for a lumber company for 38 years. I understand what a durable power of attorney does. I understand what a property transfer means. And I understand why you wanted me to sign those documents before I'd spoken to anyone who could explain what they actually said." Laurel's hands were flat on the table in front of her. She still hadn't spoken. "We were trying to help you," Barrett said. His voice had shifted. Less smooth now, more pressured. "We worry about you living here alone. Things happen to people your age." "Things have already happened," I said. "Someone made unauthorized inquiries into my accounts for 5 months. I'd like you to address that." He said nothing. "You called me confused," I said. "You've said it in different ways, to my face and, I imagine, when I wasn't in the room. I'm not confused. I know the value of this house. I know the balance of every account I hold. I know the difference between an estate plan and an asset transfer." I paused. "I also know the difference between a family that worries about you and a family that's decided what to do with you." Barrett stood up. The movement was controlled but not quite steady. "I hope you know what you're throwing away." "I do," I said, "and I know what I'm keeping." Ms. Dowell set the formal notice in front of him, the one that redirected all future contact to her office. He looked at it. He looked at me. He said nothing else. He walked to the door. Laurel gathered her things slowly, not looking at either of us. At the threshold, she paused for just a moment, and I looked at her, my daughter, who I had raised and loved and worried over for 44 years, and I kept my expression open, not angry, just present. She looked away and followed her husband out. The door closed. Ms. Dowell made a note. "You handled that exactly right," she said. I exhaled slowly. "I'm not sure I did anything brave," I told her. "I just stopped pretending not to see it." The silence that followed was different from the silence of before. Before, the quiet in this house had a waiting quality, holding its breath, expecting the next intrusion. His quiet was clean. Barrett sent a text the following morning. We only wanted to protect you. I hope someday you understand that. I read it once and put my phone face down on the counter. Laurel called on Monday, her voice careful in the way that tells you someone has rehearsed. She said I was being influenced, that I was pulling away from people who loved me, that no attorney should be making family decisions. I told her I loved her, and that, whenever she was ready to have a conversation without Barrett writing her lines, I'd be here. I wasn't angry when I said it, I meant it. Liam called, that evening, from 2 states away, just to hear my voice. I told him what had happened at the table when Ms. Dowell placed that second document in front of Barrett, and his expression finally stopped performing. Liam laughed quietly. Good, he said. You'd been watching for a while, I said. It wasn't a question. A while, he said. I didn't want to alarm you before you were ready. This young man, whom I had once rocked to sleep in the back bedroom of this house, he had been keeping watch without making a sound until the moment I needed to hear it. Some things run in a family that have nothing to do with inheritance. The following week, I finalized something I'd begun 3 months earlier, long before the folder, long before I'd had a name for what was happening. I had made an offer on a smaller house. Not because Barrett suggested I downsize, and not because the pressure finally wore me down. I'd made the decision in my own time, from my own thinking, after walking through this big house one evening and noticing how many rooms I moved around without entering. What I wanted, what I had quietly decided I wanted, was something close to the neighborhood where I'd lived as a girl, near the garden club I'd belonged to for 15 years, near a small creek I liked to follow in the early morning when the light came through the trees sideways. The house I found had 2 bedrooms, a sunroom, and a yard sized exactly right for tomatoes and herbs. The paperwork had been sitting at a title company for 6 weeks. I'd been waiting to clear a few things first. I signed it on a Wednesday morning. Ms. Dowell sat beside me. My decision, my name on the line. That same afternoon, I finalized my trust documents and named Liam as my primary beneficiary. He didn't know. I hadn't told him I was considering it. I made the decision the same way I'd made most of the decisions that had shaped my life. Privately, in my own counsel, because it was right and not because anyone expected it. When I called that evening to tell him, he was quiet for a long time. Grandma, he finally said, you don't have to do that. I know, I said. That's precisely why I did. Barrett emailed once more, about 3 weeks later, composed carefully, short, suggesting things had gotten out of hand and expressing hope that we could find a way forward. He didn't mention the inquiries. He didn't mention the documents. He didn't mention the years of money that had moved in one direction and never returned. I didn't reply, not out of anger. I just had nothing left to explain that the paperwork hadn't already said more precisely than I could. Laurel and I have spoken twice since then. Not about any of it, just small things. She asked whether my knees were giving me trouble this winter. I asked about her sister's new baby. We're finding our way back to each other one careful sentence at a time, and I'm patient. I have more time than I used to feel I did. The new house is coming together slowly, which suits me. The plants from the old sunroom have adjusted. The tomatoes are in the ground. The creek is 4 minutes from my front door on a good morning, and most mornings are good. I keep the trust documents in a fireproof box in the hall closet, not from worry but from habit. The same habit that made me keep receipts in a tin box for 40 years. The same instinct that told me, before I had words for it, that the things you've built deserve to be kept somewhere safe. Jean used to say the most important decisions are the quiet ones, the ones made on an ordinary afternoon with nobody watching. I thought for a long time that he was talking about courage. Now I think he was talking about clarity. The two feel similar from the inside, but clarity is steadier. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be recognized. I wasn't brave when I walked into Ms. Dowell's office with that folder. I wasn't brave when I sat across from Barrett and watched his certainty run out of room. I was awake. I had finally stopped being polite about what I already knew. If something in this feels familiar to you, the soft pressure, the careful dismissals, the way the word help can be turned into a slow replacement of your choices with someone else's, then I want you to hear me. You are not too old to understand your own life. You are not too tired to protect it, and you are never past the point where you can make one quiet, deliberate decision to stand on the ground you've earned. Find someone who will tell you the truth. Make one call. Take one step in the direction you choose, not the one someone else has mapped out for you. That's all it takes. One step, and then the next one after that, on your own terms, in your own time, toward the life you built and never stopped deserving to live.